Hello guys, welcome to London Players Guild. My name is Peter and I am joined today by Nathan, our sponsored player, who also
Hey, how's it
streams
going?
Magic every Thursday if you're curious on his Magic drafts.
Yeah,
And today we have a bit of Harry Potter news. Sorry, I meant Strixhaven. We have a Strixhaven news. So yeah, a quick thing. Strixhaven is a brand new set for Magic. The spoilers just started. We knew that the command cycle is coming back, as you can see on the screen. We got quite a few new cards, new mechanics to talk about. And as I'm not as versed in Magic as Nathan is, so I invited Nathan to help me digest what is happening here. So Nathan, you had a quick look. What's your feeling for the set so far from what you have seen?
I think the set's pretty interesting. Like you said, Harry Potter it's definitely giving off that
Yeah,
vibe, isn't it? Going to school and learning your witchcraft and wizardry.
and with all
Um,
this dormitories or whatever they
yeah,
call it.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think at least from like a casual perspective, it kind of fits that growing theme of trying different existing themes from outside of Magic and then trying to bring those into Magic World. We had what was Ikoria a few sets ago,
yeah.
looking at like the Godzilla cards and stuff. And although there aren't any specific Harry Potter cards in here, it definitely has that feel, doesn't it?
But
Um,
Lord of the Rings is coming to Magic, and that has been confirmed.
yeah, actual Lord of the Rings, which yeah,
That's
I,
going to be interesting. We also have D&D. D&D was easier to acquire because the same company owns both.
they already own it. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. So I mean, this is kind of already like I feel people are mixed emotions about this kind of thing. I don't really have an issue with it personally. I think when it first got spoiled that The Walking Dead was coming out, Lord of the Rings were going to be in Magic, and D&D. I initially thought, yeah, I just played my card game to I don't want to be associating it with other things that I like. But when you think about it, there's no reason why these things can't exist in this universe because the idea of Magic the Gathering, it's a multiverse of like different random planes with different things on there. So why can't a planeswalker just randomly planeswalk to Middle Earth and they see Aragorn fighting Sauron or something? Or
yeah.
you know,
No,
it's,
I
I
agree with that. The problem for me would be the execution, right? Walking Dead, I didn't have an issue with it being Walking Dead. The
yeah,
issue was the execution because those were mechanically unique cards in a very limited supply, and they did see a
sure,
play in Five Color Humans in Modern and
yeah.
in
I think
Legacy.
the distribution needs to be addressed, and
Yeah,
if it's something that can be widely accessible and it won't be on a very limited print run, then yeah, that's fine. Like if they just printed it as these are cards in standard. By the way, there's Harry Potter in this set. You can use him. He's part of
yeah.
whatever school he's learning, whatever. That's fine. Like,
I
but
would
if
enjoy
it's
that because it gives you that look into how Magic would reimagine like Lord of the Rings. How much we
yeah,
also have Warhammer. I think 40k coming in because Space Marines are going to be coming. So I
mm,
want to see how Magic with its very special artwork is how they're going to approach both Lord of the Rings and Warhammer. But that's not what we're talking about today. Today we are talking about the mechanics of Strixhaven. If you want to
yeah,
hear this conversation, let us know down in the comments. We are planning to have that conversation actually about the future of Magic and what all of
mm,
those announcements mean. So yeah, we're just going to scroll through some of the cards here. One of my favorites is Rowan and Will, and don't add me here, but this is my commander as well, the one from Battle Bond, and I absolutely love those commanders. And here
yeah,
they are in interesting way. They're connected now because they're the model dual-faced card. You have two faces, and you choose which one to cast. And we see a comeback of planeswalkers with passive abilities. This is something we haven't seen since War of the Spark, and I'm not sure what I feel about that because War of the Spark planeswalkers were really powerful because of those passive abilities.
mm. I think with at least with these abilities from a playability standpoint, they should be a lot easier to track. I know when Water Spark first came out and I was playing some competitive Magic, I was playing stuff with like Teferi, Time Raveler, and that always used to cause um, like game rule violations when people forgetting that you can't cast instant speed spells at sorcery speed. Things with Narset, people forgetting that as well. So at least with this Planeswalker, your instant sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast. It's a lot easier to track.
Yeah.
From a playability standpoint, at least it's not going to be game breaking that people try and play into the fact that, oh, I forgot, I didn't see that issue. But while still being able to be using the deck and built around in a way that's going to, benefit and impact the deck.
It's essentially a Goblin Electromancer on a Planeswalker, because both have the same static ability. Your instant and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast.
Yeah, and I kind of like the fact as well, like, this is quite a common theme, I think, in this set, is that the front card is a cheaper variant, and it does something beneficial to the deck, and then eventually when you cast the flip side of whatever double face card, it normally has the rewards from what you've done earlier in the game. So for this one, eventually, if when you do manage to emblem, if you play Rowan first, you get the emblem down, you then play Will, you get to draw cards, and then eventually you'll be able to get the value from being able to just double spell each turn, like paying 2 mana to copy your spells. So I like the fact that this comes down. I didn't really like the front side to begin with because I couldn't really see where it fits in a deck. Like if you put it in an aggro deck, it's dealing 1 damage each turn for a 3 mana Planeswalker. That's fine. But then when you
put it in Storm deck, it deals 3 damage because you draw plenty of cards at Storm.
That's true. Yeah. If you can get any mana reduction from it, if you play this and then next turn you play like Manamorphose, chain a couple of Manamorphose and then uptick, deal 3 damage to them is pretty nice. Also, just in like an aggressive red deck or a red-blue deck, if you just play this on turn 3, all your lightning strikes just become lightning bolts, which isn't something to frown about. When you're playing an aggressive deck and you don't have many lands in your deck, making your spells all cheaper is obviously really important. So being able to have the ability to double spell on a turn really kind of showcases how strong this card can be.
I definitely like the fact that it's also a good card in Commander because it deals damage to each opponent. It doesn't target the opponent, you can't hexproof against it. I think the only save is preventing damage or phasing out with the first protection. But the fact that you deal that damage to every opponent is something that's worth remembering if you play Commander. Sadly, this Rowan and Will cannot be your Commander. So it is going to be included in my Super Friends Rowan and Will, though, as one of the 99.
Sure. Hey, you can play an Oathbreaker as your commander, if that still exists.
No, I'm using my Rowan and Will from Battle Bond as a commander because they're amazing as a commander. And yeah, we also have Liliana. Oh, sorry, Professor Onyx. That's definitely not Liliana.
Yeah, I didn't realize when I was reading through the cards. When I was going through the spoilers, I noticed after reading the name of the card and the description of like the upticks and stuff that it said Legendary Planeswalker Liliana. I was like, oh, Liliana's in this set. That's interesting, but that's Professor McGonagall right there.
Yeah, that's where she ended up after being saved by Gideon. After Gideon sacrificed himself. We actually have a really nice artwork where it shows her reminiscing that point.
That's one of the lessons, right?
Yes, one of the lessons, one of the mechanics we're going to talk about. But the first mechanic we're going to talk about, because there is plenty of those here, it's Magecraft. Magecraft is an ability that triggers whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell. And the first thing that has been mentioned on stream live when they were revealing those cards was, imagine what would happen if you played those abilities in a Storm deck. At least that makes me think that they're aware of the problematic interactions with the Storm deck, so they don't look too bad. Like we see the blue Magecraft is you draw a card, but it's on the 4 mana body. So it's not that easy to use in Storm, right? The 4 mana usually goes for Gifts Ungiven.
Yeah, I guess with Gifts Ungiven, you cast it in your opponent's end step at instant speed. You don't have to worry about Lightning Bolt or Fatal Push or something to kill it. And it's going to draw you 2 cards that are normally going to be helpful for you at the time. Yeah. And also one of them normally is a Past in Flames, which technically you're drawing 3 to 4 cards because obviously your graveyard's just an extension of your hand in Storm. So
if you have all the rituals, then, you just go off from the Gifts Ungiven. When I was playing against Storm, they would cast Gifts Ungiven during their turn just because they ritualed a couple of times. And then it just went off.
Yeah, yeah.
This is scary. I do hope that that Storm is going to see some resurfers, but I do hope it's not going to be problematic.
I think when you look at when I first looked at the Magecraft, I wasn't really overly impressed because I think the problem is there's a lot of reasonably costed creatures that have Magecraft on them, and they normally reward you by being aggressive. Like if we look at Eager First Year on your screen there,
Yeah.
whenever you cast an instant or copy an instant or sorcery spell, it gets +1/+0 till the end of turn. So if you can chain a couple of like Defiant Strikes or anything really that just cantrips and draws cards and stuff. Obviously, this becomes a big problem and can attack for like 5 or 6 just on turn 3 if you're lucky with your draws. But some of the it's very hard to draft or to build a aggressive deck that revolves around instants and sorceries, but using a creatures as a way to deal damage and attack. So like you have to find the balance of putting enough of these creatures in where the Magecraft becomes relevant, and also having the instants and sorceries in your deck that actually benefit and complement that game plan.
I think that's
Stuff like
where Dragon's Guard Elite comes in, because I think it's brilliant
yeah,
for mono green Stompy. Because you use
I
your ramping spells, get counters, and then you go to her ability for 6 mana, where you
yeah,
double all the counters.
I definitely like Dragon's Guard Elite. I think that card is pretty strong. Just playing that on turn 2, and then like you said, I think there's a 3 mana search your deck for
Yeah.
a forest, put it into play tapped, and then you also get a lesson card from it as well. So
Oh,
like
nice.
playing this on turn 2, playing that on turn 3, getting a lesson card ready for turn 4 makes something like Dragon's Guard Elite really strong. And I think that's probably going to be one of the really strong and overused Magecraft cards from this set because it
Yeah,
is
it looks
just
like
a
one of the
2-drop card.
strongest.
Yeah, it's a 2-drop card that has a late game pump and can be fitted in any green X base deck. So I think that yeah, I'm really impressed with that card. I think that'll do well in standard.
The other Magecraft card I think is going to see play is that Liliana in either Grixis or Esper control.
Yeah, and I
It's a
think
win con.
there was also a buyout for I can't remember the name of the card. It's 1 black. Target player discards 3 cards, and then that player may copy that spell and target someone else or target anyone. So what you do is you play Professor Onyx, and then your next turn you play that card, target yourself, discard 3 cards, copy it, target yourself, discard 3 cards, copy it, target yourself. All the same time, the Magecraft ability of Liliana goes off, deals 2 damage, and it's a game-winning combo on its own.
Oh god, it reminds me of the Walking Ballista combo with
Yeah,
Helios from
but
Pioneer.
I know it's like this. The card has spiked and is I don't
Yeah.
know. As I said, I can't remember what the card is. I'll find it after this. But this card already existed. I think Rao is it Viceroy from War of the Spark had the same effect.
Yeah.
Whenever you copy an instant or sorcery spell, deal 1 damage to an opponent. So
It's different
from
colors though, right? Because that one
it
was
is, but
blue-red.
this puts you in mono black.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously you'd have to be in Grixis for that combo, which is obviously good and bad. It's good because you get to play blue, you get to obviously have the card draw in there, and it only costs 4. So I don't think this really brings anything from a modern point of view, but I definitely think the Liliana is going to be strong in standard. It does have that strong black planeswalker feel that you play this on turn 6 and it'll just run away with the game.
For me, she's very reminiscent of the Liliana from War of the Sparks.
Dreadhorde General, yeah.
Yeah. It's very reminiscent of that. She gives you that win condition when you play a control deck. Your opponent casts a spell, you counter it, and then you drain them for 2. Which also, if you survive that long, it gives you that out against aggro. Because normally aggro just wants to bring you as low as possible, but then you drop this, and then suddenly you can start climbing back up.
Yeah, and it's always nice seeing like a very heavily costed planeswalker having the ability to protect itself when it comes down.
Yeah.
You play Professor Onyx, you -3. It's going to get rid of a planeswalker or a creature. So, yeah. It's pretty strong.
It's a non-targeting removal as well because it forces to sacrifice. But yeah, you mentioned another new mechanic, which is Learn and Lesson, which is a reminiscent very much to a Companion, and I know right now everyone has the flashbacks of Companion. Lurus, for example. So how does Learn work? Learn is an ability like, here we have Professors of Symbology, which is a 2-drop, 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, you learn something. So you can either reveal a lesson you own from outside the game, so a sideboard, or you can discard a card to draw a card, so Ramage. And then lessons are instant or sorceries with a special tag lesson. Here we have Confront the Past. We see Professor Onyx remembering when she was Liliana and Gideon sacrificed himself for her. We haven't seen many lessons yet, but I am calling it now. There's going to be a lesson that takes additional turn.
They've actually released a couple of the common lessons at the moment. So the common lessons aren't any colors. They're not color specific. One that I have here on my screen is Introduction to Prophecy. It's a 3-mana sorcery lesson, again colorless. Scry 2, then draw a card. So I think from a limited point of view, if we go back to Professor of Symbology, if you just draft some of these lesson cards, put them in your sideboard, and you have a lot of these, when they enter the battlefield, learn. Like a 2-mana 2/1 in white that draws a card is.
Yeah.
I don't want to knock white, but that's pretty good for white. And
yeah, white is known for not having a draw engine.
Yeah, exactly. And you can draw cards that are they're going to either buff your creatures, they'll get rid of an opposing creature or opposing non-land permanent, or they just scry and draw, help your fixing. It's going to be really helpful. And then also they have the redundancy from the fact that if you don't have any lessons left, you can just rummage. Discard and draw is not awful in the late game. And if we look at Pop Quiz there, that 3-mana instant speed, when I saw this originally, I was like, wow, this is an instant speed divination. You draw a card and you draw another card which is going to have a desired effect. Like I said, scry 2, draw.
On the other hand, it is going to reduce the amount of cards you have in the sideboard. But if we see some lessons that are good sideboard, means you will have access to them in the main game, in the game 1.
Yeah, so I don't know what the restrictions are going to be yet on lessons, how many you can have. But if it's like companion, you can have one. It'll be less important. It won't be as good. But yeah, if you can have 5-6 of your sideboard cards.
I think at the moment it is you can have any amount in your sideboard and you choose which one you want depending on the situation from what they were saying.
Okay, so how does that work in in best of 1 formats? So I guess you can technically have your entire sideboard.
In best of 1, technically you can have a sideboard.
Yes, so you can have 15 lessons and then just reap the rewards of these cards where you can pay 3 mana. I'll draw a card and then I'll get the right lesson for this right specific moment in time. And then when we see the lessons when they get spoiled, we'll understand how the decks are developed from that. So I'm pretty excited for lessons, I think.
To be fair, I think lessons would be like Pop Quiz, as you said, divination, but one of those is the answer you actually need at this given time. If you're playing against a control deck, maybe there is going to be a counter spell or a heavy removal for big things or planeswalkers. If you are playing against aggro, you maybe can get a fog effect. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a fog effect.
Yeah.
So there is definitely something there.
And I also like the fact that the common cards don't have any specified costs. So if we continue to look at Pop Quiz, if we play that with the Will and Rowan double-faced Planeswalker, they obviously become a bit more reasonably costed. Obviously, a 3-mana scry 2 draw a card, it isn't the best in terms of an overcost. It's pretty overcosted for what it does. But when you have a Will and Rowan in play, and that now becomes 2 generic mana to scry 2 and draw a card, then I'm liking the look of that even more. For all of them, for that matter, I think. So I definitely think that some of these cards, like the Planeswalker, Will and Rowan, has definitely been designed with the emphasis to play the lessons and
I
learn
also think the colorless lessons are being designed as a limited format cards. This is essentially what it is. Because you need to be able to have some lessons, right? Yeah, just moving on from that, we have one card that a lot of people are excited about. It's a Boris Commander that grants you card advantage. I don't know how much you play Commander, but a value-oriented Boris Commander. It's not very... You don't come to that often. So this is a nice thing to see. Yeah?
Yeah, I think just as a 4-mana 4/4 with Vigilance, without any other stats, that's still pretty good.
Yeah.
But having the ability to, for X tap, exile an artifact from your graveyard, make 2 of those 2 tokens of that card. You can play this on turn 2 if you use a mana crypt, and then you can sack the Mana Crypt, then tap it for 0, put 2 copies of Mana Crypt into play, and you've just like accelerated a tremendous amount. So
Uh,
I can definitely,
or even Sol Ring is also amazing.
even Soul Ring, yeah. So I can definitely see this. Like, this is definitely a good card for Boros, because I think Boros in Commander is definitely probably the weakest color combination that you could be in. So this is quite exciting
Hmm.
for that.
We have some Apprentice. Every color combination here, which are the enemy colors, got an Apprentice, which does something on the Magecraft. I think by far my 2 favorite ones are Witherbloom and Quandrix. Witherbloom essentially drains your opponent by 1, and Quandrix Apprentice. You look at the top 3 cards of your library. You can add land to your hand, and the rest go to the bottom of your deck. So it helps you fixing that color. If you don't see any lands there, well, everything goes to the bottom. But at some point, you will know the order of your deck.
I definitely like Quandrix Apprentice while Growth Spiral's in the format as well.
Oh
You play
yes,
Quandrix Apprentice on turn 2. Turn 3, you play Growth Spiral, trigger the Apprentice, definitely guarantee a land for your Growth Spiral. Then you draw a card, then you play a land.
yeah.
That's going to be pretty exciting for deck building.
We have the reveal lands. So those are the enemy versions of the Shadow of Innistrad lands, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
yeah,
I know a couple of people getting I don't want to say annoyed, but I guess kind of miffed that we'd see a rotation of lands in standard and then not see them for another indeterminate amount of time, and it's happened with the the fast lands
yeah,
from I think Kaladesh.
yeah.
So like it's nice to see that they're now revisiting these lands and now completing the cycle for people that go, yeah, I like these lands and I want to have one of every type.
I mean,
So
I remember
that
how big thing was reprint of the Shocklands.
yeah,
Back
yeah.
when Ravnica was a thing. I was quite surprised to see Skrylands coming in again. So there was quite a few interesting. It's also nice that they make new cycles of lands and they actually fill them in.
Mm.
Like we had MDFC's dual lands as well, which are very interesting addition, I must say.
Yeah, I think they're probably one of the stronger lands that have come out of standard from recent times. Just being able to have any fixing at any point in time
Yeah,
of any color it's very strong, and I think the mana fixing in standard at the moment is as strong as it's been for a long time without having to rely on fixing from other cards. Stuff like Cultivate and Achieve of Aether, that kind of stuff for your fixing. When your lands come in, they're guaranteed to come in untapped of 1 or 2 colors, and then you have stuff like Fabled Passage. The fixing is really strong at the moment,
yeah.
and I think this just helps complement that.
And I think the last keyword that we have to talk about is wood, which is going to be an evergreen blue keyword. Which essentially, when the creature becomes the target of spell or ability, it is countered, that spell or ability, of course, unless its controller pays to, which is a good protection effect, right?
Yeah, it's nice to see that they've kind of recognized this as a blue ability now. You've seen this in the past with things like Frost Titan, is the one that springs to my mind at least. So yeah, it's just nice to have some pseudo evasion that can be printed on blue cards. It's not oppressive like hexproof; it can be dealt with, but it just makes it tricky to get rid of some of these problem creatures.
It definitely makes it more expensive to deal with them,
Mm.
and it's definitely going to be interesting if, for example, you have multi-target uh, ability, and then in response you can give your cards ward, and then essentially you counter that ability unless your opponent pays 4.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, we have more lessons. We have one of the Elder Dragons already showed, which has an interesting design, but I don't think we're going to be covering the Elder Dragons just yet. We're going to go through a couple of DFCs here that we think are going to be nice or at least interesting. And yeah, there's the field trip, which searches for basic forest, puts it on the battlefield tapped, and learn, which you are talking about. It's a very good
Mm.
common spell. It only
Yeah,
searches for forest, a basic forest on top of that.
it does. But I think as far as like cultivate style effects go, I know they've been playing around with the 3 mana search a library for a land, put it into play for a while. You've seen it, as I said, from like Cultivate, Spring to Mind, Growth from the Ashes. This
Yeah.
is a 3 mana rampant growth that draws a card as well. 3
Yeah,
mana get
I think the important thing is that it draws that card and it lets
yeah.
you choose what you're drawing with it. I think green is going to be really happy about that, especially like mono green stomping, uh,
Yeah,
being able to
being
choose those cards.
going from 3 to 5 as well on your following turn
Yeah,
allows you to pay for some of the slightly overcosted lessons as well. Like you could, there's a 5 mana exile target creature or non-land permanent.
non-permanent.
Non-land
It
permanent.
and
Yeah.
its controller draws a card.
So being able to just shoot, like having a mini tutor for some slightly overcosted lessons, but ramping into the ability to pay for those lessons on curve is going to be very strong. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm definitely excited for that, and especially at common as well.
yeah. This is definitely a nod towards the limited players as well.
Mm. Yeah, I
I
agree.
think this is going to be a really fun format for limited play. It does remind me quite a bit about War of the Spark, which was my favorite limited format, and I want to get some boxes in draft.
Yeah, War of the Spark is one of the better draft formats of recent times. I'm really enjoying Kaldheim. That's what I've been drafting most Thursdays at the moment is Kaldheim drafts, and it's nice to see that set on set the limited experience is continuing, because what normally happens is you get a couple of really bad limited formats where it's not that exciting to draft. The draft format gets sold very quickly, that you know what are the best decks and what you should just be drafting all the time. But at least with these types of decks and formats, it's very open. You can, there's multiple archetypes that you can draft, and yeah, it just makes for a fun draft experience.
Yeah, War of
So
the
I'm
Spark
excited.
had also War of the Spark. You were not really stuck into any particular color
Mm.
because you had the Grixis support for Amass, which could be essentially paired with anything, and that gave you some additional. But that's me talking about my favorite format. So this is Rowan and Will. We talked about that. This was one of your picks. Flamethrower Sonata, I think, was the side that you were excited about here.
Yeah, so again, I do like the fact that you've got two modes for this. One is a sorcery spell. So let's look at the red type at the begin with,
Yeah.
because I think that's probably the best one. So it's red and a colorless sorcery, discard a card, then draw a card. So it's got rummage built onto it. When you discard an instant sorcery card this way, Flamethrower Sonata deals damage equal to that card's mana value to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. So just in like a blue-red tempo deck, being able to rummage away a non-useless card at the point with it, if it's something that you can't cast immediately, you can just discard that and deal damage to get rid of a threat, or deal 5 damage to a planeswalker. If you pair this with the 3 mana divination, I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah. Pop quiz.
We pop quiz, yeah. So you can draw a card, find a 5 cost lesson, and then pay
And then
2 to
discard
discard
it
that
as a
lesson
food
and
for
deal 5
this.
damage to something.
Yeah,
So
that's actually
I
a
think
good
this
shout.
card, yeah, you can kind of already see the deck building itself at the moment with like this, the Planeswalker, Pop Quiz. It's kind of exciting just to have that ability just to chuck an expensive lesson away, but to guarantee a kill on a creature. It's going to be really good.
I'm really excited to put this in my commander deck and discarding Nexus of Fate with this.
Sure, yeah, deal 7 damage to something, yeah.
And then Nexus of Fate comes back.
Goes back in, yeah, exactly. And then from the front side as well, when you get multiple copies of this, if we use the same example, we discard the 5 mana lesson from our hand. We then play this 4 mana Torrent Sculptor, so it has Ward 2. And then when it enters the battlefield, exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. Put a number of +1/+1 counters on this creature equal to half that card's mana value rounded up. So yeah, we deal 5 damage to a creature or planeswalker. That we then play this on turn 4. Exile that card, and it's now a 4 mana 5/5 that has
with
protection.
Ward, yeah.
With Ward, yeah. So
That is actually... Yeah, there will probably be just lessons that you play. If you're playing this, there will be some lessons, as you said, that you play just to discard. But in the worst case, they're also a 5 mana removal.
yeah, exactly. You don't have to discard that card. So I definitely like the idea that your sideboard being an extension of your hand, and you'll definitely see that in best of one. Like if you just
I
have
think
a
it's
blue
mostly
red
going to be an
deck.
extension of your main deck, but I want to see how this is going to play out in best of 3 formats mostly, because this is going to affect how many cards you are going to effectively have access to in your sideboard. And I would not be surprised if we have decent enough lessons that could be potentially a sideboard cards on regular basis, if we see some good control decks just popping in with that, and that's what I would like to see.
Yeah.
Another one is Plarg, Dean of Chaos, which is a very interesting effect, because you are mostly interested in that 5 mana tap. Sorry, 4 and a red tap. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary, non-land card with CMC 3 or less. You may cast that card without paying its cost, and the rest of the cards go to the bottom of your deck. So it's kind of cascading, right?
Yeah, I like this card because it's a 2 mana 2/2, so you can play it early on, and it has some impact to what you're doing. You can attack with it and obviously just chip away at your opponent, or you can fix your hand. You can discard and draw. So like having that stapled onto a card is pretty good on its own. Having the 5 mana tap, and then potentially you just put a 3-drop into play, or 3-drop or less, is going to be pretty strong for when you're flooding out in like an aggressive red deck. So like
Yeah.
I don't see. I was kind of surprised when I saw the CMC 3 or less clause, but I guess that's a way to try and curve stuff like Tybalt's Trickery was the most recent card that springs to mind. Where they just kind of counter their own spell, and then you put an Emrakul into play, and the game's over from there. So I guess that's the idea, is like they're trying to curb interactions like that. But just having like a 5 mana draw a card in essence on your red deck in an aggressive deck is pretty nice. It helps mitigate your flooding. It's obviously not the biggest payoff, but it's still going to impact the board and continue to ramp
red
things.
doesn't draw that many cards, and as you play what you draw, you will find if you're going mono red, you will find yourself with all of that mana that you have nothing to do with, and this is your mana sink, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You pay 5 mana, but you have plenty of mana, and then you get your 3-drop that can affect what else you can do. For example, you will get something with Magecraft ability when you capped a instant or sorcery in your hand. The fact that it can't hit legendary cards, I think, is a blessing, because then you would be able to play cards like Narset, which is a 3-drop, but a legendary Planeswalker.
I guess even things like you don't want to hit duplicates of this, because I think if you were to play this in standard and it didn't have that clause, and you were to pay 5, reveal the cards from your deck, and you hit another Plague, you're going to be pretty sad.
I mean, then you're going to play Augusta, right?
Yeah, sure.
It is MDFC, and Augusta is a 3-drop as well, so you can play her off this skill.
You can play as Augusta, yeah. But there will be there's lots of red cards that are legendaries. I think there's a dwarf from Kaldheim,
Magda,
the 2 mana 2/1 Magda. So if you had a Magda in play, you paid 5 mana before you went to combat just to see if you hit like a haste creature. You revealed a Magda, you put it into play. Well, I've just wasted 5 mana. I have a tapped creature, and I've just wasted my turn in essence. So it's nice to have that mitigation that you're not going to hit a duplicate of a card in play, but from a design point of view as well, it's nice that you're not going to hit like a Narset or a Teferi or something like that.
But I must say, it looks really peculiar when you pair it against Augusta, because they're supposed to be... they're two sides of the same card, right? So on one you have this very chaotic, as the name suggests, Dean of Chaos, very chaotic card. On the other you have Dean of Order, which essentially gives all your cards vigilance. If it attacks.
Yeah. This is a very interestingly worded card, and I kind of like this card. I was very skeptical at first, looking at this as a 3 mana 1/3 that doesn't. It's not an anthem. It either gives your creatures +1/+0 or +0/+1. And for white, I was kind of thinking, well, why can't you just give all your creatures +1/+1? It would definitely help white decks, just to give them a bit more of a stronger push. But looking at how the card is worded, you get to attack with all of your creatures into your opponent, and then you can decide to give them vigilance. You can basically just untap the creatures, or you can keep them tapped and just make them stronger. So it can really put pressure on your opponent to effectively block in combat, because you can untap your weaker creatures to give them a higher backside, or just put more pressure onto your opponent. So I like this card after kind of reviewing it in a bit more careful consideration. It is kind of paired weirdly with the 2/2, but I guess if you play Plague first of all, and then you play this, you can tap in your opponent's turn. Obviously, it becomes a 3/2 when it's blocking, so it's not completely irrelevant. But it'll be interesting to see what gets made out of it.
It's not it forces you to untap each of your creature, and then you can choose any to tap, which makes it interesting. For example, with the very old inspiring mechanic from Terror's Block, when this creature becomes untapped, you get that trigger. then you can still tap it. So if you have skills that say, abilities that say when this creature is tapped, it also doesn't need to be creatures you're attacking with. So you
Yeah, I was
can
going to say,
use tons of tap abilities and then attack with this, just the only card that attacks, and then tap everything so you can tap it again.
well, you don't even need to attack with this. It just says
Uh,
whenever you attack.
oh, whenever you attack. Yeah, you are
So
correct. I missed that. I thought that this needs
yeah,
to attack. No. But you can
so you can
attack
actually
with
just
a
leave the spell.
token.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then untap all of your creatures. So you can loot with it, or you can pay 5, activate his ability, then attack, untap it, then loot, or pay
Yeah,
5
or
again if you've
pay
got 10
5
mana.
again if you have it.
Yeah,
Actually, this card keeps on growing on me the more I read it.
yeah,
Some wacky combo with this, and now I want to play it.
yeah. You can if you can somehow go infinite with attacks by tapping stuff. Like I think Nagila in Commander might be able to benefit from
Oh,
this.
sorry.
So I think Nagila is a red, but it's got every color symbol in it.
Yeah.
It's like a 3 mana 2/2. I think whenever you attack, it makes a 1/1 that's tapped and attacking. And then you
Yeah.
can pay Wooburg and untap all creatures that attack this turn, and then there's an additional combat step.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if you play this with like Cryptolith Rights, which says when you can tap a creature and add 1 mana of any color, and you go to
Yeah.
combat, you can potentially just go have it infinite combat steps and just win the game.
Yeah.
So
Especially if you would have
definitely
also some decent mana sink that could win you the game out of that.
Yeah, so there'll definitely be some shenanigans, I suspect, in EDH around this card and in other commander decks.
Yeah, I think this would make for very interesting commander.
Mm.
And we have one more that I was more excited about, and then more we talk, the less I'm. It's a good sideboard if Rakdos Sacrifice will ever become a thing again.
Yeah, so
Essentially.
a 1 mana 1/1. Obviously, you can play it on turn 1, and whenever a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. So any kind of self-sacrifice based decks, this will obviously be something worth considering in standard. And then it also has the upside: you can pay 2 when a creature your opponent controls dies, and make a 1/1 priest, a 1/1 pest. Sorry,
Pest,
that
not
when it
priest.
dies, gain a life, not priest. So yeah. I don't think this card is particularly good, at least at the moment. But it has the potential to be impactful if something like Cat Oven comes back, or those types of sacrifice effect decks.
Oh, if we're going to see more of those, right, in the future.
Potentially, yeah.
Because this is staying till next year as well, 2022. So this is going to stay in rotation for a while. Whereas Dean of the Root is not very inspiring, at least not for me. Whenever you gain a life, you may pay 1. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and those creatures gain trample until end of turn.
Yeah. I've always been trying to review these cards with the front side and the back side kind of working together. You play the cheaper cost version to begin with, and then you'll get, when you see another copy of it, the higher costed card comes down later on and benefits from the cheaper side. So this one is a 1 mana 1/1 with Menace and Lifelink. So the idea is that you attack with this, it becomes tricky for your opponent to block, so you're able to normally chip in for 1 damage. When you have Lizette, Dean of the Root in play, you pay 1 and then gives your creatures +1/+1. So that in itself is pretty interesting. But giving your creatures trample when I guess the main way you're going to trigger its ability is through lifelink is,
I mean,
it's a bit...
there's also those pests, because when those pests die, you gain 1 life. That triggers her as well. And we have seen that in this Golgari, I don't remember what's the college, or dormitory, or whatever you want to call it, what's it's called. But when the Golgari, we've seen a Golgari lesson that gives you 2 more of those pests, and they seem to be the way to go for this color combination in this set.
I suppose if you look at what we've had in the past anyway, if you were to put this in the Cat Oven deck with Witch's Oven, and you were to sacrifice one of the pests, then yeah, maybe this actually becomes a pretty good staple. You can sack a pest, pay 1, give all your creatures +1/+1, and then very quickly you have a very strong and intimidating board. The more Witch's Ovens you have, the more pests you sacrifice, the bigger your creatures become. So it definitely fits into that style of deck and that archetype. So
especially if you can go wide. I think 1 mana to get a board wide +1/+1 counter is scary enough. Question is, can you go wide, or can this survive long enough for you to go wide?
I guess when you're playing it on, it's a 4-costed creature, so if you're playing it in a deck where you're playing lots of early interaction, like if you play the 1-mana 1/1, you play Witch's Cat or whatever the cat's called, you can deploy a very quick board of creatures. The lesson that makes 1/1s as well. So you can amass quite an aggressive board with tokens. But yeah, I guess you run the risk of reaching criticality on your, like having a board criticality where you don't have any cards left in your hand to develop your board, and you're just slowly sacking your own creatures to make the rest of your creatures bigger. Eventually, your opponent's going to have enough creatures in play where it doesn't really matter, and they can block, or they just point a removal spell at Dean of the Root and it dies. So
or they will settle the wreckage. Or I don't know what's the current whiteboard wipe in the rotation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is. We have still Shale, Dean of Radiance, which is very similar to the green one we have just seen, but it feels so much better because you don't need to spend mana on this, and you don't need to gain life, so fulfill that condition. The only thing you need to do is tap it, and those creatures needed to enter this turn. But if you put this and the Dean of Order in one deck, they're both white. Then you attack with something, you untap this guy, and then tap Shile again, and get another +1/+1 counter on everything that just entered the field.
Yeah. You can kind of see how the deck's already building itself just looking at these spoilers. Like, this reminds me of Thalia's Lieutenant that came out in Shadows over Innistrad, which saw a lot of play, mainly for the fact that obviously it pumps your board, but also pumps itself in the late game when you just play more creatures after it. But if you just play this on turn 2, it's a 2-mana 1/1 with Flying and Vigilance, so it has some evasion in itself. You can play this on turn 2, start attacking your opponent, and then every turn after that, when you make a creature, you can just tap it, and that creature just becomes bigger. So it definitely just scales the rest of your creatures on its own. Like, you can just play this in an aggressive deck, and then all of your creatures are now just incredibly strong.
Much
stronger, exactly. Yeah,
and that does add up, especially if you're going to have creatures that are, lifelink, for example, or vigilance themselves. A 1/5 becoming 2/6 is a huge deal.
And any token enablers as well, just like raise the alarm style effects, put 2/1/1s into play. Now they're 2/2/2s.
We have the other side, Ambrose, Dean of Shadow. So this one is 2 black and 4/4. This is clearly designed to work with Shine.
Yeah. So again, you kind of see you play the undercosted card early on into the game. You get your value from it. When you have enough mana, you then play the flip side, and that will reward you for playing the early creature. So yeah, with Embrose, you play it. It's a 4-mana 4/4. You can tap it, put a +1 counter on another target creature, then it deals 2 damage to that creature. It's important to note that you can do that on your opponent's creatures and your own creatures. So yeah, you could buff one of your opponent's creatures, give it +1 counter, but if you're attacking and they're blocking, it makes blocking very awkward.
Or if the creatures are all ones, right?
Yeah, if they're 1 toughness creatures, you just get to shoot their creatures. And then the secondary ability, whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it dies, draw a card. So yeah, let's say hypothetically we make our Bird Cleric on turn 2. Turn 3 we play Raise the Alarms, put 2 1/1s into play. We now give them both a +1/+1 counter. Turn 4 we play this and we attack. If those creatures die, they're most likely trade into something because they're 2 power creatures. We'll draw cards from them. So like, just having a dual face card that performs well on curve is going to be really strong for these aggro decks. And you can play this in stuff like Lurrus, where the requirement of it is that all of your permanents in your deck cost 3 CMC or less.
Yeah, and because for that purpose the front side is being considered, and it costs 2, you can actually play Lurrus. That is at least as far as my understanding goes for this. And I think I'm correct because I've seen rulings like this. But so much changed with Companion and with the MDFCs that it's hard to tell. Time will tell. But yeah, so far it works with Lurrus, and I think there also might be quite an interesting aggro. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing you play with those cards at some point.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited for this set. I think it's going to help. It's going to do a lot for standard. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to see what comes out of that.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is it. This was the last card finally. This time, 3 times the charm. This is the last card that we wanted to talk about. Thank you very much for joining me. If you guys enjoyed this little talk about Magic, I know it's been 45 minutes. Thank you for sticking up with us. We will try to do more conversation type Magic videos, which are going to be shorter. But if you enjoy Magic, Nathan is streaming every Thursday, 7:30 in the evening UK time. So make sure to join him in. He is at the moment drafting, but probably as soon as Strixhaven is going to hit, he's going to be doing some constructed play. Because I can already see him eyeing the cards and building the decks already.
That's the plan, yeah.
So make sure to join in, and hopefully we're going to get something good. Thank you guys for watching. If you're not subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. We are getting just over 800 subscribers now, so hopefully we're going to hit 1,000 subscribers by June. That's at least the target for now, so please help us. Thank you very much, and see you guys next time.